Hello guys, it's been a while. I am really excited to get back on here and talk about the 13 books that I read in July and August. Normally I'd like to do a monthly reading wrap up, but life has just been crazy recently. We've been traveling every weekend. My husband and I went to Chicago for his grandmother's 90th birthday, and then the weekend afterwards we were in New York City. We spent the whole weekend there. It was so much fun. We went to an Albanian wedding in New Jersey afterwards, and then I literally just flew back like an hour ago from Colorado. So it has been a crazy whirlwind couple of weeks. This last trip was spectacular. We saw Hozier in Denver, then we went to Rocky Mountain National Park, and I have to say the altitude really got to me. I felt like I was dying on the hike, but it was so beautiful, absolutely worth it. And then we wrapped up our trip by seeing Gregory Alan Isakov, who is my personal favorite singer of all time, at Red Rocks, and it was just a dream. But yeah, in between these crazy action-packed days, I've been managing to read a bunch of books, I've been jotting down some summaries and my thoughts about them, and I am ready to rank them today on a star scale, 1 being the worst, 5 stars being a fantastic book. So let's get into it. So first is A Fate Inked in Blood, which I gave 4 stars to. This was a book that I had on my TBR since the beginning of summer, and I'm really sad I put it off for so long because it was a fantastic book. It is the first novel in a fantasy series that is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. Gods would bless certain children with a drop of their blood on conception. So that way when the kid gets older, they're able to invoke the name of this god or goddess that gifted them the drop of blood, and they can use their powers. The first example that we see of this is a man named Vragi, who was gifted the blood of a god Njord, the god of the sea, and so Vragi could control sea creatures. Now Vragi was an asshole, so he just used his power to monopolize the trade on fish. He would keep the waters near other boats clear of fish and have the fish just leap onto his shores. Although he cheated the market, seafood was always plentiful. Now, sometimes he would get carried away and kind of kill whales or fish for sport, watch them suffocate on the shores for no good reason, even if they had an abundance of seafood already in town. His greed and his cruelty were forgiven by the villagers because they looked up to him almost like an idol, like a gift from the gods. So this book is set up with a pretty interesting magic system. It's almost like there are these superheroes that walk among normal people, and they're not necessarily moral or good. I almost imagine that this is what that show The Boys is like, except for that seems extremely gory and I will never watch it. We also have a very pious society because there are proof of gods and goddesses all over these Viking territories that make up Scotland. Now, Scotland is basically a country that is divided and ruled by many jarls, which are like kings. Now, this book follows our female main character, Freya, who is married to Vragi, the cruel fish guy, at the beginning of the story, and she absolutely hates his guts. He married her because she's super hot. I mean, take a look at the cover of the novel. That's her. But she makes her revulsion of him well known. She talks back, she actively prevents herself from bearing a child of his, and he loses interest in her real quick. So he winds up betraying her to this powerful jarl named Snorri, and Snorri sentences Freya to death by dueling with the jarl's son, who is very sexy, he's muscular, and his name is Bjorn. So during this little showdown, in a desperate act of self-preservation, Freya reveals that she is actually a shield maiden. This means that she can invoke the power of Lean, that she was gifted a drop of blood by the goddess Lean, and she can cast a protective barrier. Now this is a big, huge deal because there is a prophecy that states that all of Scotland will be united under the rule of one jarl, the jarl who controls the fate of the shield maiden. So Snorri thinks he hit the jackpot. He makes Freya his wife and binds her with a blood oath, and at the same time he makes his son Bjorn, the hot, sexy warrior, her bodyguard. I'm sure you can see where this is going. There's like this forbidden romance between Freya and Bjorn. There are wars between Vikings who have magical powers. There are quests. It's all good fun. Where I take 1 star away, I don't think any of the reveals were really a surprise. I found that the book was pretty predictable. I also think that aside from the romance, which I loved, I wish the plot had a little bit more action to it. It was great, don't get me wrong, but now that we have established the setting, the magic system, the romantic plot in the first book, I'm hoping that the second book really delivers with some riveting plot points. We'll see. It gets released in May 2025. Okay, we've got a little special guest here who's been crying at the door, so everybody welcome my son, Pippin. Say hi. Dirty boy, I need to give you a bath. Okay, next is a short walk through a wide world. I have a hard time figuring out a summary to tell you guys because I have so much and yet so little to say about this book. This book is marketed as The Secret Life of Addie LaRue meets The Life of Pi, and I love both of those novels. I think they were really evocative. So I was looking forward to this book quite a lot, and it's set in the 1800s all over the world. I'm very interested in travel. I could look at travel blogs all day long, and oftentimes I do. So for me, this seemed like the perfect book. We start by following our female main character, Aubrey, as a 9-year-old in Paris. Now, she's taking a walk with her sisters, and she finds what happens to be like this sentient wooden puzzle ball that seems to be following her. So she scoops it up, she takes it with her. Her and her sisters go to this magic wishing well, and as her sisters sacrifice things that they want to give to the well in order to wish for miracles in the community, Aubrey starts to wish for something but decides she does not want to give up her magic wooden puzzle ball, so she takes it with her, and after that, a whole lot of stuff goes down. When Aubrey gets home, she starts to feel sick. She almost like seizes up and blood starts to come out of her orifices, so her parents take her to the doctor. By the time she gets there, she's fine. But as soon as she starts to head back home, she notices that it happens again. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her, but she notices a pattern that whenever she leaves her house, she feels better, and then whenever she comes back home, she starts to get much, much sicker. She is certain that her ailment comes from standing still in one place, so in order to evade the pain and ultimately death associated with her condition, she's forced to travel from place to place, never returning to the same location twice. We see Aubrey struggle with her lonely existence. Every encounter that she has is so fleeting because she can't stay in one place, she can't make roots anywhere. And we watch her figure out survival tactics and watch her overcome communication barriers, all the while she is trying to find a cure for her affliction. I think a big problem with this is I just don't know what the message the author was trying to get across was. Maybe it went over my head, but at the end of the day, I just didn't want to put a single second more of thought into this than I already had while reading the novel. Aubrey didn't have lasting enough relationships or impactful enough relationships with any of the side characters for the lessons to be meaningful that she learned with them. I was hoping to get the travel bug by hearing some like lush descriptions of places and foods and cultures, but I found the whole thing just to be kind of meandering. By the end of the book, I was left with more questions than answers, and I found that really unsatisfying. This book left me more confused and frustrated than any other book that I can recently remember. It's not all bad, it's just not that good, and so to me, it didn't deliver what it promised. You know, putting great names like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, The Life of Pi in the description. So I don't really recommend this book. I give it 2 stars. Okay, next up I have Memoirs of a Geisha. This was a reread for me. I first read this book when I was much younger. And at the time I gave it a 5-star ranking, but as an adult, I found some more things about this problematic than I remember when I was younger. And so I dropped it from a 5-star to a 4-star rank. For those of you who haven't read this book, we follow a young Japanese girl named Chiyo, and she grew up in a poor fishing village named Yoroido. She was born with a rare genetic mutation that turned her irises like a blue-gray color. Her mother falls ill, and Chiyo and her sister wind up being sold by her father. Chiyo's sister winds up going to a brothel, and Chiyo gets sold to an okiya to learn how to be a geisha. Although this sounds glamorous, Chiyo is essentially an indentured servant and finds herself trying to navigate this new life and really struggles in the majority of the first portion of the book. This book was extremely transportive. I felt like I really could see a lot of culture in the early 1900s in Japan. This was a compelling and immersive story with a ton of heart. It really made me feel yearning and joy and sadness. I especially love hearing about the rigorous training that geisha had to go through and the monetary system behind how they made money and what they would do. It gave me a ton of new perspective, but my favorite thing was how they talked about kimonos in this. The author went into great and vivid detail discussing all of the kimono that the geisha wore, both Chiyo and her peers around her, and it was fabulous. I felt like I could really picture the kimonos, and I loved it. What struck me as an adult is the over-sexualization in this book that I guess I didn't really pick up on when I was younger, but especially talking about Chiyo as a young girl, like a 12-year-old, and the attention that she was getting from these older men was pretty disturbing. Now, it was an integral part of the storyline. Geisha's virginities get auctioned off to the highest bidder. However, it was just a lot. Now, I should mention that there has been a lot of controversy with this book since it came out. It was written by a white guy in America who studied Japanese culture in college, then moved to Tokyo. When writing this book, he relied heavily upon interviews with an old famous geisha named Mineko, and then she later sued him. Mineko wanted the interviews to be completely confidential, and while he didn't name his main character after her, he did mention her in the acknowledgments, and she was pissed. She was also deeply offended in his portrayal that geisha were also basically just prostitutes. At the end of the day, despite its problems, this is a fascinating and beautifully written book. If you're interested in historical fiction, this is an older novel, but something that you should keep on your radar. Okay, so let's talk about Ask For Andrea. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Whenever I'm in a slump, I reach for a thriller. Now, Ask For Andrea is on Kindle Unlimited, and so I downloaded it. Once I did, I could not put this book down. This book is a fresh take on a serial killer story. We know from the get-go that the murderer is a man named James Carson, and we are told the story from the perspective of his 3 murder victims as ghosts. Spooky. Megan, Sky, and Brescia are all young women who are looking for love in the wrong places. Now, they are murdered and dumped by James, who seems very much the eligible bachelor. We see them through their eyes as they meet James, are killed, and then get stuck here in this earthly realm trying to figure out the afterlife. One of them follows James and watches his family dynamic and the predatory dates that he takes other women on. One of them follows her own family as they mourn her death, and then the third one follows the detective that found her body as she's investigating the case. And let me say, this book kept me up at night. It's just a reminder that as women, we have to be so careful. And I thought that Sky's perspective especially was devastating, just watching her parents mourn her loss and deal with this terrible grief. It was very sad. Ultimately, the women try to figure out more about James and interact with the world around them to hopefully stop the murder of other women out there. The girls don't link up until much later in the story, and a lot of their voices actually sounded very similar to me, which detracts a little bit from my ranking. So I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it, but it was nothing mind-blowing, especially since we already know who the killer is. It's not like we're really getting a lot of plot twists throughout the book. This was, however, very gripping nonetheless, so if you're somebody who likes paranormal thrillers, I would say give this one a go. Okay, next we have God of Malice. Oof. 1 star. I'm not going to talk about this one too much here because I plan on making an entire rant review video about this. It is so bad and I have so much to say about it. All negative. In my opinion, this was way worse than Corrupt, so I'm really looking forward to making this video. I hope you guys watch it and come with a glass of wine in hand. Now let's follow up that 1-star book with a 5-star book, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I just love this book. I can probably say that this is the best romance novel that I've read this year. I think it's great. This book is number 3 in the Part of Your World series, but it's absolutely a standalone if you haven't read the other ones. I've only read Yours Truly, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. So this book is about a guy named Justin and a girl named Emma. It starts with Justin posting his story on Reddit that he has this curse, and it goes viral. Every single woman that he dates goes on to find their soulmate as soon as he breaks up with them. Emma sees this and reaches out because she deals with the very same thing. So the two begin texting and they conspire to start dating each other. That way, once they break up, the curses will cancel out and they will be able to find the loves of their life. I feel like Abby Jimenez just watched Good Luck Chuck and was like, wow, I can do this 100 times better. And she does. Our female main character, Emma, is a travel nurse, and so she signs a contract in Minnesota just for the summer so the two can date, and they start to form a real connection. However, they both have some pretty messy family situations that get in the way. I have to say, I completely fell in love with both of these characters. I thought they were so well written, so endearing. I was completely invested in their story and I couldn't put this down. It was refreshing to have 2 leads with such relatable personalities that communicated so well with each other. I am sick of the typical romantic lead that is tall, dark, and brooding and is morally gray. Give me a Justin, give me a sweet, gooey, funny, flawed man with a heart of gold. And Emma, an absolute doll. This was the perfect summer romance. Emma and her travel nurse bestie get to stay in this quaint little cottage in the middle of a lake in Minnesota, and it was the perfect summer vibes. It makes me actually want to vacation in Minnesota, which is something that I never thought I would say out loud. Also, Emma's mother is such a good villain. I was just foaming at the mouth over her character. I don't have any friends who have read this book, but I definitely would love to dive deeper into this in the comments if you have, so let me know what your thoughts are. So yes, definitely 5 stars for me with reread potential next summer. I really liked this. So the most recent thing that I have read is The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. This was released last year. Now, Alice Hoffman is best known for her magical realism and her book Practical Magic, which is super famous, and she is a beautiful writer. This book was kind of a surprise to me because it almost felt like 2 different books. In the first half of the book, Ivy Jacob is a 16-year-old who gets knocked up and finds herself in some hot water with her parents. Her parents are wealthy and they are so ashamed that this is going to tarnish their image, so they have this plan to send her away until she delivers the baby and then to immediately give the baby up for adoption. Now, Ivy is terrified of having her autonomy infringed upon, so she winds up running away to this community in Massachusetts that's basically a cult. Actually, it's definitely a cult. Ivy is beautiful and immediately catches the attention of their male leader, who marries her and who indoctrinates her into this cult. Flash forward to the future, Ivy has her baby, who she names Mia, and she is a 15-year-old in this part of the story. We see her trying to push boundaries within the community and figure out more about the outside world. Now, Mia gets in trouble with the cult leader, and his punishments range from isolation to like branding with an iron, so pretty intense. We watch Mia become disenchanted with the community and plan her escape. She uses books that she steals from the library to learn more about the world and to hope for a better future for herself. This book really is a love letter to all things books and all things reading. And Alice Hoffman really leans into her deep feminine rage in this, which I love to see. Go off, girl. The book that really makes an impact on Mia is The Scarlet Letter. So we see the first half as this cult escape story, but in the second half, Mia actually travels back in time to meet Nathaniel Hawthorne, who is the author of A Scarlet Letter. Again, it was beautifully written, but it just felt really disjointed, like 2 separate novels, and it really dragged in the second half for me. I loved the first half. So I would say this book is fine. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. Next up, I have Butcher and Blackbird. Okay, and this is a fun one. I got this in an audiobook and I would highly recommend that format. The guy who voices Rowan is... So I looked it up and apparently he is American, but his Irish accent is, ooh, so cute. So this book is not for everyone. It definitely gets very gruesome. So I would check the content warnings if you were sensitive to any kind of content, but for me, I loved it. I'm giving it a 4.5 stars. So this book starts off with a chance encounter between 2 serial killers who only kill other killers. It's like if you've seen that show Dexter, it's just like that. So our female main character, Sloane, is the orb weaver. She is a very methodical serial killer and she likes to arrange her victims in elaborate displays. She is in a sticky situation with a kill gone wrong and she finds herself at the mercy of the Boston Butcher, who is a man named Rowan. He was targeting the same guy and is initially a little disappointed that he lost his kill, but then he learns who Sloane is and kind of fangirls over her. It's very funny. I love the beginning of this book. I found Rowan to be so charming. So the pair go to lunch and they decide to link up every year and do this sort of competition. They get assigned the same mark by an outside party and they have to be the first one to find him or her and kill them. These 2 find themselves in some crazy predicaments, and while it is quite dark, it has this funny undertone and I really enjoyed the novel. Sloane and Rowan are just destined for each other. They're like a fucked up yin and yang. They're truly a perfect weirdo match. I love to see the pining, the flirting, the development of their relationship. I loved it. This is dark romance done right. This is a dark, messed up book, but the relationship is still built off of trust and communication and understanding and consent. Some of these dark romances that I'm seeing are just so awful, and they are romanticizing assault and they are poorly written and they're bad, and I hate that that's what's popular right now, but this book gives me hope in the genre. The only reason this isn't a 5-star for me is because I found the dialogue to be a little corny. Okay, it's starting to get pretty dark, so I think I'm gonna call it a night, but we will pick up tomorrow with the rest of the books. Be prepared for an outfit change. Okay, and we are back. All right, let's see if we can get this done before the sun sets again. Next up, I have Leather and Lark, which is the second book in the trilogy, and it follows Sloane's best friend Lark and Rowan's brother Lachlan. I still really enjoyed this book, but I like it significantly less than the first one, so I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Lachlan is a contract killer, and he is just a big, bad, gruff toughie. Lark, on the other hand, is this blonde, bubbly singer who just murders bad men as like a fun little side hobby. She's very manic. She gives Harley Quinn vibes for sure. Again, the dialogue just makes me cringe from the get-go, but these two have a not so meet cute in the beginning of the story, and then they have this contentious relationship start from that point forward. For an absolutely ridiculous reason, Lachlan and Lark have a marriage of convenience, even though the two of them hate each other's guts. As the two are figuring out their unconventional marriage, their relationship starts to develop into something else entirely, and let me tell you, I ate this smut up. Listen, this book is just so different from the first one. It really heavily focuses on the romance aspect, and the plot kind of takes the backseat a little bit. I still don't really understand what the villain's motives were, and there was a lot of nonsense, but I'll tell you what, I could not put it down. It's not as strong as the first book by any means, but I'll definitely be continuing the series, and I look forward to the final book in the trilogy. I recently read The Teacher by Freida McFadden, and this is my second Freida McFadden book. I really liked The Housemaid, but this one just didn't quite hit the mark in my opinion. It wasn't terrible at all, it just wasn't necessarily something that I liked, so I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. It starts with somebody digging a grave. Who is digging? Who's dead? It's a fun hook in the beginning, but then we get immediately launched back in time and we get introduced to a bunch of very unlikable characters. We have Eve, a high school math teacher who is apparently very plain looking, but this girl loves shoes. On the first day of school, she wears some brand new Jimmy Choos to teach her high school students math. She basically thinks about shoes a lot, she likes to shop for shoes a lot, and she likes to go to the shoe store. She is married to Nate, a super hot English teacher at the same school, who is way out of her league and doesn't want to have sex with her anymore. We also have Addie, a high school student who allegedly got a fat old teacher fired. There have been rumors about an affair between the two of them, and because of that, Addie has been relentlessly bullied. Addie finds herself in both Eve and Nate's classes this year, and some crazy stuff goes down. Are there twists? Yes, many. Did I like any of them? No. I found this book problematic, but I could see how a lot of other people might like the scandals and the twists and turns and all of the fast-paced action that goes down in the book. It wasn't for me, but I could see why it was so popular. I just really did not like any of the characters, and I found myself having a hard time investing in the storyline because of it. I'm not gonna quit Freida McFadden quite yet, but this story did not grip me like The Housemaid did. I also read The Inheritance Games, which I've seen all over TikTok and all over YouTube, and it's been really hyped up, but sadly, I did not like that book. To be fair, I don't think that I'm the right target audience for it. It's tricky because I do find myself really liking young adult novels as long as they've got good writing and a good plot. I find that a lot of times the young adult label is stamped on them if they just have an absence of slutty scenes or spice, or like really heavy themes. So sometimes it's a great read, but this book did read really, really, really young to me. So Avery is our main character. She is a high school student that is just trying to get through school and not make waves. She's smart, she's got some trauma, and aside from that, she doesn't have much personality at all. Anywho, she finds out that a billionaire named Tobias Hawthorne has left her his entire fortune with the stipulation that in order to inherit it, she must stay at the Hawthorne estate for an entire year. This makes some waves. Who is Tobias Hawthorne and why did he leave a random teenage girl all of his money? Avery has no idea, and the family is not happy about the whole situation. They feel snubbed, they want answers, and frankly, so does she. It's very Knives Out, but much less interesting. This book promises games and riddles, but they were so boring, and don't even get me started on the love interest. Hawthorne has 4 male grandsons who all live on the estate, and there's this pseudo love triangle between Avery and 2 of them. But to be honest, she shouldn't pick any of the boys. Like, hello girlie, you are the richest teenager on the planet. Think big. There are lots of boys out there. You don't have to just pick between the 4 that you live with. The one boy is pretentious as hell, and the other one is kind of a dick, and to be honest, they're both terrible and need therapy. Also, everybody in this book is obsessed with a dead girl named Emily. I just really didn't like this, and I struggled to get through it. And I was hoping for this big payout at the end that would make it worth it, but we got the lamest twist imaginable. I was so mad. I absolutely will not continue this series, but again, just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for everyone. I think that maybe if I was 14, I would have really liked this, but in this stage of my life, I can appreciate that I'm not who this book was written for, and that's okay. Anyway, 2 stars. All right, next up is Good Girl, Bad Blood. Good Girl, Bad Blood is the sequel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and this book is just so good. I really liked it. I'm giving it 4 stars. I gave the first one 5. So in this book, Pip and Robbie release a true crime podcast to talk about the murder that they solved in book 1, and it's an instant hit. Pip is happy to put her detective days behind her, but when her friend's older brother goes missing, she winds up being drawn back in. This book is excellent. Pip is such a strong character. She's smart, she's brave. I'm obsessed with her. I thought this plot was really well executed, and I was salivating over the twists and turns. This book really hooked me from the get-go. I do feel like there was a point in the middle that it just kind of dragged, but it was still engaging enough that I wanted to finish it and I couldn't put it down. The ending, loved it. I would never have guessed it, and so I like that it kept me on my toes. Again, I feel like so many thrillers are one-dimensional. In the first couple chapters, you can see who done it. But in this book, you really figure out each clue. She follows up on the clue. You get to the next step, and the whole thing unravels in a way that you can't really predict it. It was a really good book. Was it as good as the first one? In my opinion, no. So I'm going to stand by the 4 stars that I give it. I don't want to go too heavily into the plot because it is a mystery novel. However, I do think it's important to say that this isn't something that you can read out of order. It's important that you have read the first book if you're going to pick up the second book. Otherwise, you will be absolutely clueless and it'll spoil a lot in the first book. For anybody who likes true crime or was a big Nancy Drew fan, I would say give this series a go. Even if you're an adult and you don't really read young adult, this is a great one. Okay, finally we have Middle of the Night, which is something that I've already talked about in my previous Riley Sager ranking video, but this is his new novel that was released this summer and I read it in July. I'm a big Riley Sager fan, but this one was just fine, so I gave it 3 stars. This is Riley Sager's first novel about a male protagonist named Ethan Marsh, who is a 40-year-old man who finds himself back in his childhood home in Hemlock Circle. When Ethan was 10 years old, he and his best friend slash next door neighbor Billy were camping out in Ethan's backyard in like a little tent. And the next day when Ethan wakes up, he notices a big gash in the tent and Billy's gone, but his shoes are still there. Despite a search, Billy was never found after that night and nobody knows what happened to him. Despite trying hypnotherapy and dream journaling, Ethan can't remember anything from that night except for the sound of the tent splitting open. And so as he's back in his childhood home, he starts to investigate the disappearance again, since all of these old memories are stirring something up in him, and he almost feels as if Billy's presence is there with him. There was a lot of repetition in this book. There was a lot of repetition in this book. I almost feel like it could have been a full 100 pages shorter if they just cut out Ethan's internal monologue and like all of the backyard nature camp footage that they did on repeat. As Ethan is investigating the clues, it leads him on this really roundabout investigation with maybe a cult nearby. And by the time we actually get the answers, the finale was just kind of a letdown. The big reveal was not deserved. It wasn't satisfying. I was disappointed. If you haven't read Riley Sager books before, I probably would not recommend starting with this one because I don't think it's one of his stronger novels. All right, y'all, that is it. Those are the 13 books that I read in July and August. I'm looking forward to life calming down a little bit more, and I'm hoping to post more regularly on my YouTube page. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I had so much fun making this video. I hope you had fun watching it, and if you did, please subscribe, and I will see you soon.